Are you a parent wondering, how do I raise mentally strong kids, mentally healthy, authentic, who they are supposed to be? It sounds like this big, complicated question, and it really boils down to insight and understanding. And when I teach about mentally strong kids, people are asking me, can you, work with my kid? And we do have coaching programs to work with children. But it is parent involved, right? That we want you as the parent to be working on yourself, have insight into yourself, so that you can communicate that with your children, so that you can raise mentally strong kids. We can't raise mentally strong kids without looking at ourselves. So today, I'm going to go through some questions that people had about raising mentally strong kids. I'm Dr. B. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner with over 25 years of experience. I also have 7 children, 5 adopted, 2 biological. I've been through extreme hardship, special needs children, death of a spouse. So in the midst of raising kids, I did it with lots of overwhelm. And so wherever you are, whatever space you're in right now, I can help you organize that. So let's look at these questions about raising mentally strong kids. So the first question is, what is the difference between raising a mentally strong kid versus raising a well-behaved child? Well-behaved children are nice, easier. If you are blessed to have the personality type of a well-behaved child, you should take that as a blessing, but that does not mean that they are mentally strong, right? That means they, by personality, respond to behavior modification or respond to how you are showing up, right? So if a child is a people pleaser, they may be a well-behaved child. If the child responds well to the type of behavior modification you have chosen to use in your family, they may be a well-behaved child. But what happens when life hits them as adults and they're a people pleaser, or they only respond to the behavior modifications that you used in your home? So mental strength, to say that a child is mentally strong, it is not a test, right? I can't give your child a test and say, you did it, you did a great job as a parent, they are mentally strong, because it's a journey. You're on that journey, I'm on that journey. Mental strength and mental health is part of our experience in this world. And how we do that and how we show up in that is mental strength, right? And it starts with acknowledging that it's a journey, acknowledging that it's something that we need to learn. We learn so many things. Our children are taught history, math, science, physical education. And we began in the anti-stigma movement to teach mental health. But unfortunately, we're teaching it as mental illness. So our children can now identify if they're depressed, if they're anxious. But those are symptoms, not a system. So mentally strong children have a system, just like you would have a system for your physical health. Okay? So it's not an easy answer of what's the difference. But I just don't want you to be blindsided by a well-behaved child is a mentally strong child. Not necessarily, but could be, right? I personally am a little rebellious, always been that way since I was young. That doesn't mean I'm not mentally strong, right? But it is also a journey. I'm not as, I'm more mentally strong now than I was 10 years ago versus 20 years ago. So when we say, are our kids mentally strong? Are we teaching them how? Are we giving them a system of how and what to do with the thoughts and feelings that come up for them? Because we all have thoughts and feelings. All right, on to the next question. How is protecting kids from failure working against their mental strength? So when we allow our children freedom to make bad choices, we're actually giving them critical thinking skills, allowing them to experience real life consequences. Super, super hard to do, right? Like I said, I raised 7 children. I had some that were making choices I knew was going to have a very bad negative impact on their life. And although I did it all wrong, by the way, I tried to control that behavior. Negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement, punishment and trouble, and stop this, you're ruining your life. And it wasn't until they became adults and worked those things out themselves that they actually gained mental strength from it. So I'm not saying let your children do whatever, right? But I have a Raising Mentally Strong Kids course, and one of the things that came out, I was talking with a licensed clinical social worker, and I was talking about how when I was raising my teenage girls, I felt like it was this tug of war. I would be pulling them this way, and then they would be pulling me, and it was this constant battle. And she gave me this beautiful visual, and she's like, we need to be thinking of raising our children like a dance, where your child doesn't know the steps. They don't know how to move. But you have influence. You can guide them if you know how to move, right? This is going back to what I said of we need to be working on our own mental health journey and our own mental strength so that we can guide our children, right? And we can guide and influence them, but we actually have very little control. And so when we think about protecting our children, yes, we should be protecting them, but we should also be allowing them to step out, make decisions, even if we think they might be the wrong decisions, even from an early age, right? So this protection, like guardrails, not a safe, right? Like, here's these guardrails. I'm going to give you this freedom, and I really hope you make the right decisions. I really hope nothing bad happens to you. Let's talk about what could happen. And then allowing those guardrails to increase, because that builds confidence. It builds critical thinking skills. And then when things go wrong, this is our opportunity to have the conversations around what were you thinking, how did that make you feel, and actually learning a system of mental strength. I hope that makes sense. The next question I got was, how do you teach children to manage emotions without suppressing them? This is also a balance. So I'm going to use this, analogy of dancing over and over again, right? Because if we don't have emotional control, emotional regulation, we're not going to be able to teach our children emotional regulation, right? So, and I'm not expecting you to be perfect. There has been many times that I have worked with my children and I'm just like, I can't believe I said that. And even recently, my sister called me out on it of like I was intervening in an argument with my grandchildren, and I said something that was not positive, right? Now, instead of beating myself up, right, I take that correction and I go, how can I better self-regulate, right? Because I can't help them regulate if I'm not self-regulating. So that's the first thing of having that self-regulation. If you constantly suppress, and there is a time and a place for suppression. You are not supposed to just pour out your emotional hardships on your children, right? That is not what you should be doing. But if they constantly see you suppressing as the only means to emotional regulation, that's what they're going to learn. So what can we do? Your child, is having a meltdown. We're going to say meltdown, but emotional response. It could be physical. It could be like a physical meltdown. It could just be crying. But at that point where gosh, I should be understanding. But what they're upset about is they didn't get their way, or what they're upset about. Like you've decided what they're upset about, and so that you don't want to feed into that behavior. I just want you to take a moment, because in that moment, they're going to either suppress it, or they're going to have an opportunity to learn how to emotionally regulate, right? So taking off your parent with 30 years of life experience off, and sitting in front of your child as another human being, not your human being, another human being. And in their limited life experience, whatever is going on with them is super important to them. And maybe they can't communicate it. They don't know. They just know that they're angry. They know that they're upset. They know that they're hurt. Allowing them to work through identifying what it is, and then going through the process. Now, we teach the Mentally Strong method, where they think, organize, and choose, right? So you allow them to think, and then we organize that, right, into different categories. Is there some grief in there? Is there anxiety in there? And are there behaviors and choices? As the parent, we want to go straight to the behaviors and choices. You should be able to accept a no, or you should be able to, but we haven't actually taught them how to do that yet. So taking the time, and it does take more time. And as a parent of 7 children, I know taking time for a meltdown is not always available. But one of the things that I teach is, if you can't do it in that moment, make sure that we are coming back to it and trying to talk through. Some kids need a time separation. Some kids need to talk right then. But giving the opportunity to learn a system, think, organize, choose, so that they feel confident in why they're making a choice. Because oftentimes they'll make a choice because they have to. They'll listen to you because they have to. They'll clean their room because they have to get what they want, right? That's all just behavior modification. But if we can give them the opportunity to think, organize, choose, we are beginning that journey of mental strength. All right, on to the next question. How do parents unknowingly pass on their own anxiety and unhealthy thinking patterns to their kids? I touched on this a little bit, but I don't actually want to pour a lot of time into this, because those of you who are anxious and trying to be the perfect parent, you're going to do a lot of self-blame, right? And this is, a type of distorted thinking where you personalize everything. Everything that is coming out of your child is because you did something wrong, right? That is not a healthy place for you to be. And so remember, feeding our own soul, putting our oxygen mask on first, right? Of knowing how to take care of ourselves, and not, having compassion on ourselves. Yes, how we show up can influence how our child shows up. Absolutely. Having a little insight into that, but then letting it go, because your child is their own human being, right? They are going to grow up and have their own story and have their own life. And oftentimes you see stories of children that come from the same household, and they presumably had the same experience, and each child, it impacted them differently, okay? And I'm not just talking about negative experiences, positive experiences as well, right? So just doing the best that you can for yourself will pour out into your children. Do not beat yourself up over that. Next question. What is one mental strength habit parents can start building in their kids this week? The time that it takes to teach. Take care of yourself, and then giving them the opportunity, right? We teach the think, organize, choose. But even, before you learn that whole mentally strong method concept, taking the time to know that they've got their own narrative going on, and how can we disrupt the distorted thinking that they have without making it about a behavior, a right and a wrong. And I encourage everyone to learn the Mentally Strong Method. It is the foundation for mental strength. It is not the answer to everything, but it is the foundation. If you learn the Mentally Strong Method, you will be able to carry that into every aspect of your life, and as well as your kids, right? So here's the last question. How do you raise mentally strong kids in a world that ties their worth to likes, grades, and achievements? I don't know that it's directly connected. Some children thrive in that environment. Some children thrive on achievements, grades, but figuring out where our child thrives. I love to go back and use myself as an example because I've done a lot of this work, right? When I was a child, I believed that I was not pretty, not smart, and felt like I had to receive external validation, which I was not receiving, for my worth. Does that mean I didn't want to achieve? No. As an adult, I have achieved a lot. I wanted to achieve. But it took this ability to really understand who I am, what I like, what achievements make me feel good versus the achievements that the world says I should have, right? I openly tell people that I can't read a document and answer questions on the document. It's why I didn't do well in, elementary and grade school, right? Because it's all about reading and answering questions. Do I have like a disability or something? Maybe. Have I learned to achieve despite that? Yes. So achievement, productivity, purpose are intimate words that are like helping our children figure out what actually fills their cup. What purpose makes them feel good? What achievement makes them feel good? Not because someone else said that that's what they should do, right? So it's okay, and this is the world that we live in. And, I've heard people say, well, I'm not going to send my child to school. We homeschool. And that is a choice, and that's fine. But there are many people that have to send their kids to school. But being able to have those conversations, okay? Why do you want to get a good grade in this class? Does this interest you? Should you still try to get a good grade even though you don't like that subject? What would be the pros and cons of that, right? And helping children see bigger than the behavior modification, right? That's right in front of them, because that is a trainable thing. It's not a capacity thing. And I hope that makes sense. I hope you are on your own personal journey of your own mental strength so that you can teach that to your children. I have an online course called Raising Mentally Strong Kids, but I honestly don't recommend you start there. I recommend you start with yourself. So And if you do like one of the kids' coaching programs, that your kid will work with a coach, and then you will have some assignments to be working through as well. So there's ways to kind of get started with learning the Mentally Strong method as the foundation for your family's strength. I always recommend coming to my free training. I do it every couple weeks. There's a link in the description that invites you to that, and that I go through the Mentally Strong method with the adults, and then you can kind of talk to somebody about our programs. So I hope to see you there.